Free agent prediction episode part 2 here on the Friday, November 8th edition of the Just Baseball Show. You got Arm Layton and I'm Peter Apple. Off the top, we're going to rip a couple of headlines. Kyle Hendricks is an angel. Why? We're going to talk about it. Also, we got Willson Contreras moving over to first base for the St. Louis Cardinals. Mookie Betts going back to the infield for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And we have 12 more free agents to predict. We had 16 on the first part of this episode, which you can go back and listen to. But this is the relievers. This is some interesting contracts that we're going to place on some teams, as well as assign a contract value. And it is all brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Remember, folks, when you download BetMGM, make sure to use promo code JUSTBASEBALL. Why? First bet offer up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if it were to lose. So, download BetMGM. Use promo code JUSTBASEBALL. Deposit at least $10. And on your first wager, if it loses, you get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets. But remember, gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older. Terms and conditions apply. Aram, this is coming out on a Friday. And I love being happy on a Friday. So when I see that Kyle Hendricks is going to the Los Angeles Angels, I know it didn't happen technically on Friday, but it has made me happy all week. The Angels are right back to it.
Yes. They're like they're trying to be the Rockies so bad, man. And I'm glad Hendricks gets an opportunity to just keep throwing, because by all accounts, just awesome dude, great story, and anyone that's nicknamed the Professor, I'm gonna root for. But I honestly thought, like, when he was done in Chicago, that he was done. So it is crazy to see him get a big league deal and everything. He is still just 35 years old, right? But I mean, this guy was throwing 86, 87 miles per hour at the end of the year. I wonder if Perry Minasian just saw the last 5 starts where Hendricks did throw to a 2.89 ERA. That was also with 11 walks and 18 strikeouts in 28 innings, but maybe looked at that and said, hey, this guy can be our 5. Interesting for sure. I'm glad Hendricks gets to pitch as long as he wants to, though. There's always teams like the Angels and the Rockies and the Nationals and the Marlins sometimes that are out here just, providing those extra years for guys that want to, still kind of keep playing a little bit longer.
I think you grouped in some other teams to make the Angels feel good. No. This is an Angels move. Let's be real. This is an Angels move. You don't see the Marlins or the Nationals doing something like this, especially with Kyle Hendricks. But what I can say is Perry Minasian thinking, all right, we could potentially flip him to a contender if he's pitching well? Is that the plan here? Because to be the 5, I mean, you have guys in the minor leagues. Why would you not try them? You've tried them. You try them as soon as they're getting drafted. But now that they have some major league experience under their belt, not good enough. Now we bring in Kyle Hendricks.
Yeah, that's the part that's kind of wild to me, right? So maybe he's an insurance policy for those young guys, and like a Caden Dana and some of these others. And it is just 2.5 million, but it also is 2.5 million. So
$2.5 million.
Yeah, so that part's kind of wild to me, but I guess he's an insurance policy for, the Caden Danas of the world. And I think Jack Hanowitz is clearly going to hold on to a spot in that rotation. But, it's Soriano, Tyler Anderson, Reed Detmers, and then, now you got Hanowitz and Hendricks, I guess. So I guess he's that insurance policy for the young guys if they don't, come in and grab a spot. But yeah, kind of just a classic. Try to justify, try to understand the move that the Angels love to make us do.
Angels were off to a good start already. Let's talk about another favorite team, the St. Louis Cardinals. Willson Contreras is going to be moving to first base, and I want to read you a quote from Katie Woo's article on The Athletic about John Mozeliak, kind of detailing why, and I want you to react to this. So, and I quote, "Our medical team recommended the move in terms of if he really wants to extend his career. They think that this would be the best for him," Mozeliak said. "Having Contreras play first base, more DH, allowing then Ivan Herrera, Pedro Pajes more opportunities behind the plate. We think from an offensive standpoint, it strengthens us. From a defensive standpoint, it creates an opportunity for those 2 different players. I would say it'll be very unlikely to see Contreras behind the plate." Makes sense.
Yeah.
What's your read?
Yeah, honestly, I like it. The way that they justify it there, I like it, because I had been expecting them to maybe move Contreras. I thought that would be something that we saw, especially because you know how much I loved Ivan Herrera going into this year. I think we may have been the only top 100 list that had Ivan Herrera on it. And I know he had some great flashes, then a little bit of a tough stretch, got banged up a little bit, and I still think showed quite well last year when he had the opportunity to, but it was still this weird 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing where it's like, is he going to catch? Is he a backup? Then he starts playing more when Contreras got hurt. So it was a weird situation where I think it's a young guy in Ivan Herrera who has put up great numbers in AAA, clearly way too good for there, has shown flashes at the big league level. Like this guy would be your future behind the dish. Give him the opportunity to play every day there. Goldie's gone. Contreras clearly can swing it. And they've also clearly been very weird and wishy-washy about his defensive abilities and ability to call a game there. So, I mean, if we're talking about a team here that's probably going to try to be as cost effective as possible, this satisfies the hole you had at first base. You have a catcher that I think should have been getting more reps anyways last year. And now you have those two positions settled and taken care of. I actually like it. And, you know, I'm glad that Herrera's finally getting some consistent run because I've been pounding the table for that for a little bit. And I do think he's going to be a solid catcher for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember talking about Willson Contreras' splits during the middle of the season and even dating back to last season when he DHs. He was one of the more prolific bats in the National
Interesting.
League. And when he's catching, the bat kind of trails off a little bit. So I assume what Mozeliak is doing, well, this guy is not helping us behind the plate defensively. We need an upgrade there. We also need an upgrade at first base now with Goldschmidt likely leaving. Well, we have a guy who has played some innings at first base. This isn't a completely new position to him, but again, not a ton of experience there. But if you're going to move over to a position, catcher to first base makes the most sense. And knowing that when you take his legs out of it, right, the how strong you have to be to continue to catch while also hit, right? As he ages, it makes sense that you'd move over to first base, and the splits say that he hits much better in spots like these. So it does make sense to me, right? A move with the Cardinals when you spend a bunch of money, you spend catcher money on a catcher and then moving over to first base. I want to make fun of the Cardinals.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like this makes sense. And I
Yeah.
think he's actually going to be a pretty good first baseman.
Well, and I think a big reason why they decided to do this was, you know, the end of the year when they finally waved the white flag, right? Where it was like, okay, we're going to see what we have for the future. Jordan Walker comes back up and starts to show some good things again and get some consistent run. And then they brought Herrera back up from AAA. And in his final 18 games at the big league level, to wind down the season, he slashed 368, 463, 579,
Yeah.
1,042 OPS, and he only struck out 18% of the time. Like, I have always talked about the approach and the sneaky EVs that could start to translate into more power. The question had kind of been, how does the defense come along? And, you know, there were some things that I think he could kind of tidy up there. But how do you do that if you don't get the opportunity to catch consistently at the big league level? They made sure he could. He caught almost every single game down the stretch there. So I think that's a big part of this thing. He really succeeded in the audition. And now he has had time to work with these pitchers, continue to develop as a catcher. Herrera does, and I think that's going to be huge for them. If Herrera is looking anything close to what he looked like last year, I think in the snippets that we got where it was up and down a couple of different times, he still put together a 2F WAR last season. Like if he's a 3 to 4 win catcher, which I don't think is crazy at all, then you have Contreras swinging it at first, and like you said, he's been so much more productive when he's not DHing. All of a sudden, you might actually have an upgrade in some way from what you were getting offensively last year and the struggles of Goldie. So I like the move. It's cost effective, and I'm interested to see what they do now, you know, at other spots because of that.
Yeah, that's what we'll be looking at. That's why I'm excited to continue to talk about these free agent predictions, part two. But before we get to that, Mookie Betts
Yeah.
moving back to the infield, or at least that's what the Dodgers are saying. The way I read this, because Mookie has, of course, played a lot of infield. He originally came up as a shortstop, and he's just the perfect baseball player. You can go play right field if you need to. I'm sure if they said, hey, Mookie, we actually need you in center this year, he'd be like, screw it.
Yeah.
It'd be a different glove or
And it'd
whatever
be
it
good.
takes. And he'd be
Yeah.
great, right? He can play short, he can play second, he can play wherever he wants. He's Mookie Betts. How I read this, I think this reads as an indictment on Gavin Lux because
Yes.
I don't know why you're moving now Mookie Betts back into the infield. Of course, Teoscar is still out there, and I'm sure they're going to be in the Juan Soto sweepstakes, but this doesn't read we're moving Mookie Betts to short because Juan Soto is our number one option. We're going to sell out this offseason for him. This just feels like there are some free agent bats who we're going to talk about, and we already talked about, who potentially we could sign to move into the outfield. and we want Mookie Betts in the infield. And who is the last man out there? It feels like Gavin Lux.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, Lux just he felt like and I know he had a couple decent moments in the postseason, but did he not feel like the odd man out when you're watching these postseason games? I mean, it was the one guy in the lineup where I was like, okay, this is a little bit of a breath here that you can take. And I think with the way we don't know what they're going to do, they could do anything, right? The Dodgers, but I think with the way that they may approach the middle infield situation, it's going to maybe be a bit of a revolving door, right? Where Tommy Edman can get a lot of those reps at short, but if they, want him in center, he can play center. I think it's easier for Mookie to go back and forth from second and short than, right to short. And, I think just focusing on being on the dirt and doing that, I think probably makes the most sense for him. And, I don't know how second base compares to the outfield in terms of wear and tear. I'd imagine it's probably a little bit easier overall, but I'm not sure. That'd be a great thing to be able to ask some players, but not a lot have that experience of moving around that much. Obviously, shortstop is very demanding, and that's the only thing I think about here. So is it, when they say infield, is it predominantly second base and then filling in at short? Like I imagine, of course, if they go out and get Willy Adames like we all predicted, then it makes it very obvious there that you just have Mookie at second, Adames at short, and you roll from there. But I do think that this probably means predominantly second base, and that sounds like to me a little bit of preserving him, but then also I think it's a lot easier, especially in this free agent class, to address corner outfield a little bit more cost effectively. Whereas, if you go get Adames at shortstop, who's playing second? Like you don't want to waste Tommy Edman's defensive value there when he's a great shortstop and center fielder, and you'll probably need him in center. I think it makes a lot of sense to have Mookie at second, and then it's very easy to address the corner outfield position. And you have an advantage here where you have probably the most productive second baseman now in Major League Baseball. You'd have a good shortstop, and I think it makes it easier to go address that corner outfield spot.
1,000%, because Tommy Edman even proved it in the playoffs. Like, this is a guy that the Dodgers want to keep and want to probably play at shortstop. Of course, Tommy Edman just increases his value by his ability to play multiple different positions. But the reason I think that it's actually going to be Tommy Edman at short opening day for the Dodgers and maybe not even Willy Adames is because do they want to lock into a big 7-year, potentially $200+ million deal with Willy Adames, or just roll with Tommy Edman, put Mookie Betts at shortstop, sign Teoscar back, and then get another corner outfield bat?
Exactly.
That's what makes the most sense to me. And also, in the article written by Fabian Ardaya on The Athletic, they didn't specify what position Mookie was going to play in the infield, but they did say they want to take a little bit off his legs.
There you
Which
go.
tells me that's second base, not shortstop, because it makes no sense that you would move him from an outfield to a shortstop and then talk about the health benefits of it.
Put your feet up. Relax, buddy.
That makes no sense. So reading between the lines, that tells me second. And it tells me that then they are in the market for corner outfield help, not shortstop, because then you'd assume Edman would be there. So that's what I think is going to happen. And I'm not saying it takes them out of the Willy Adames sweepstakes at all, right? I predicted, you predicted, Jack predicted, all of us Willy Adames to the Dodgers. That makes the most sense because, quote unquote, they're in the market for a shortstop. They always spend the most money because they're the Dodgers, and he's the top shortstop available. And when you look at the overall market, there's not going to be a lot of shortstops that then come onto the market that can rival a Willy Adames. So it makes the most sense, but I just feel like it's still not going to happen and he's going to go somewhere else.
Well, and to your point, though, it gives them options, right?
Yes.
So instead of, having to have all their eggs in that Adames basket now, I think they can move and do different things. And, if they'll probably make their best offer. Let's say, the market gets driven up to a point where the Dodgers just say, hey, that's not worth it for us.
Yep.
Then you, like you said, shift that focus to corner outfield where you can allocate those funds towards 2 mashers that you could have in each corner. So I think just giving them the flexibility there and having Mookie move to second base, I think makes a lot of sense. And I talked about it last year. We all did, where it was like the same discussion was had. Hey, we need to kind of preserve Mookie Betts a little bit. We want to, make sure that we're not running him into the ground. But then, unfortunately, guys go down. Gavin Lux couldn't throw, and it was survival mode, and Mookie stepped up and played short. But I think that even exacerbated the importance of preserving him now a year later when that was important to them last year. So I think that's also a huge part of it. And, I think that's going to be something that should help Mookie overall and be available for the entirety of the season. So it gives the Dodgers different options to be able to address this lineup. And that's pretty crazy because it doesn't even really need to be addressed that much.
Absolutely. So those are the headlines. Now it's time for Arm and I to predict 12 more free agent
Yeah.
destinations. We'll also try our best to assign contract value to each. But before that, our first break. All right. 12 more free agents for Arm Layton and I to predict. We're going to start with some elite relievers, right? We didn't touch on relievers. We also, so I'll just lay out who we're going over. Tanner Scott, Jeff Hoffman, Clay Holmes, Carlos Estevez, Jurickson Profar, Ha-Seong Kim, Joc Pederson, Tyler O'Neill, Yusei Kikuchi, Nick Martinez, Max Scherzer, and Paul Goldschmidt. So we're not lacking in talent. We're more lacking in direction, I think, for some of these guys. So let's get to it, and we'll start with the relievers. Tanner Scott, former Marlin, throws an absolute BB gun.
Yeah.
Right? It's 99 from that short arm slot. I thought he was so impressive. And I think among left-handed relievers in Major League Baseball, there's only a couple that you feel confident in bringing in against a Shohei Ohtani or a Yordan Alvarez. And I think Tanner Scott has an argument to be near the top of the list. So I think the money that Tanner Scott is going to get is going to surprise some people. I think
Yeah.
he's going to be a very valuable commodity in this free agent market. And Jack gave us his answers of where he thinks these players are going to go. We'll start with Jack's answer. Got him going to the Phillies. I don't. I think another reliever is going to end up going to the Phillies. Who you got before I give my answer?
I got the Cubs. I
Okay.
I think that they're in an interesting spot where they definitely need to address the bullpen. I don't think they have much, over the last couple of years. And this to me is an opportunity to, I think, potentially, as you let it out, get the most impactful reliever arm on the market, or one of, at the very least, and a guy that can go 1+ innings and do a lot of different things. And I don't think the Cubs were in on him like some of the other teams were. I know the Phillies were in on him. I know the Yankees were in on him, and making some pretty competitive offers at the deadline. But also, I don't think the Cubs were in a position to push the chips like that. So I think, just when you look at what he would do to this bullpen, like, I don't even know who their projected closer would be at this point. What would be Porter Hodge or
Yeah.
like Tyson Miller?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, those
I
guys,
think this,
credit,
yeah,
those guys were very good, but again, they're not
yes,
proven.
yes, and I think Tanner Scott, with the last few years he's had, is not only proven elite. So I think the Cubs are in a spot here where they should spend plenty, because so many teams are restricted RSN wise, and are probably going to either tread water or cut payroll. Cubs don't necessarily need to do that. Take advantage of that, and you might get. We talk about how generally relievers end up getting overpaid. It'll still be a lot of money, but it may not be as ridiculous as it normally is to get one of the top relievers on the market coming off of 2 phenomenal years.
Yeah, I think that's a great fit, right? I think for these relievers, there's a lot of good fits.
Yeah, exactly.
I went a different direction. Feels like a Ross Atkins move, Toronto
Hmm.
Blue Jays, where they don't have a closer, right? If I'm looking at their bullpen right now, you could say Jordan Romano, but he's coming off a really, really tough year. He's also coming off some injuries. Chad Green, Eric Swanson, Ryan Burr, they really don't have a reliever that I think Blue Jays fans are ultra confident in. The closest would be Jordan Romano, but again, do you want to rely on that guy as your closer? I
No.
wouldn't. And when we're looking at where the Blue Jays are potentially going to spend money, I think this is going to be an offseason where they really do spend, where they really want to compete here, because they do have a core of good young hitters. They still have a lot of their pitchers contractually obligated to continue to pitch for the
Yeah.
Blue Jays, and then a bullpen with just kind of nothing in it. So that's why I had Bregman going over to the Blue Jays. For me, that made sense as their big time deal, and I think this is another one. And the contract value I assigned, 5 years, $60 million, and you think to yourself, damn, 5 years for Tanner Scott? Do you remember Robert Suarez signed a 5 year, $46 million contract at 31 years old with the Padres?
Yeah.
Like, Tanner Scott is a better reliever, I think, than Robert Suarez was even at that time. I know Robert Suarez is great, but Tanner Scott is really, really good. That was the kind of the comp, and I gave Tanner Scott a little bit more cheese on the end of it. What do you think
Yeah.
about that one?
I think the only thing that I think could drive it down a little bit, because I was thinking anywhere from 50 to 60, is just the market, and
Yep.
we'll just have to find out, what that looks like for relievers. I think a lot of recent, big signings for relievers have kind of gone a little and then you have the situation where it might not be as much of a bidding war, where generally I think where relievers have the leverage is everybody wants them. But I think that in terms of market value is right there. I figured it would be like 50 to 60. And again, I think it depends on some circumstances there, but I mean, dude, this guy had a 175 last year in 72 innings, and was one of the most coveted postseason, or acquisitions to make the push to the postseason. He had a 2.31 the year before that in 78 innings. So it's not just the dominance; it's also the availability and in different roles, right? He's not one of those guys where you put him in the seventh or the eighth, and now he doesn't know how to pitch. He's comfortable in the seventh, the eighth. He's also comfortable closing. So I think a lot of teams are going to be looking at him and saying, "Hey, this is a guy that would help us a ton." So I was thinking mid 50s, 60 wouldn't surprise me at all.
You like the Blue Jays fit and the Phillies fit as well?
If the Blue Jays are feeling that confident, yeah, I think the Phillies were another one that I was looking at as well, and I have another reliever just kind of sticking with them. But yeah, that's a team that I know was in on him, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them push the chips forward. And then, I mean, the Blue Jays have not really had a high leverage arm that any of us could trust in a while, so it wouldn't shock me to see them go that direction either.
Jeff Hoffman, phenomenal reliever. Jack has him going to the Rangers. I didn't really send anyone to the Rangers.
Yeah, neither did I. I'm kind of skeptical on whether they're going to spend. If they do spend, though, I do think they're going to go get somebody in high leverage.
Agreed. But I just don't know if they're going to spend. I almost think that it's going to be some more Kirby Yates type moves, some more David Robertson type moves, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? You don't have to spend that much money. And if you see guys in the market who you think that can make an impact with a low budget, that makes more sense to me than going to get like a Jeff Hoffman, like Jack predicted. I have him just staying with the Phillies.
Me too.
I think the Phillies found their arm and are going to stick with him. And that's just the bottom line. That's what I felt like when I'm watching the Phillies over even these past couple of years. There have been a lot of really fun, good relievers, but the one constant has been Jeff Hoffman. Like Matt Strom is coming off an excellent year, but I'm sure if you needed 3 outs to get Game 7 of the World Series, the Phillies are going to Jeff Hoffman. Carlos Estevez kind of worked, not really. Right, you have Orion Kerkering as well, who has incredible stuff, but isn't quite the dominant arm. I feel like the Phillies will just say, Hoffman, you have proven it. You are our guy, and we're going to give you 3 years, $50 million. What do you think about that contract value? Because excuse me, I have 4 years, $50 million.
Okay.
And the reason I said 4 years, $50 million, Taylor Rogers with the Giants signed a 3-year, $33 million contract at the same age. Jeff Hoffman is way better than him. I'm thinking add an extra year, a little bit more AAV, and we land on 4 for 50. What do you think?
Yeah, 4 for 50 sounds about right. It's crazy though, like that teams are still going to continue to hand out, and you have to, if you want to get these guys, hand out these 3 or 4 5-year deals. But there's another dude where you have 2 seasons now of just clear sustained success, where he's pitched to a 2.41 in 2023 and a 2.17 in 2024. I'm with you. Like, they went out and made some acquisitions to add some higher leverage guys down the stretch. I think they showed some flashes. You saw Estevez, who saw his strikeout rate drop to like 20%. He was effective, but it wasn't the same. Like, what you've got, as you mentioned, with Hoffman, and a guy that's clearly comfortable pitching there. And I think coming off of an even better year and the best year of his career, I don't think he would want to leave. And if you can match anything close to what he's getting offered, I'd imagine he'd want to stay there. So I think that's a great fit. That's why I had him sticking there as well. And remember also the Phillies, they acquired Estevez. He's a free agent. And then also, they sent out Sir Anthony Dominguez, and, I not the same caliber pitcher here, but, they did send out a couple of bullpen arms that may have been able to make that leap next year if they were still believing in it. So I think that's another side of it where you want to retain at least one of these guys, and Hoffman seems to be the safest and make the most sense.
Absolutely. And you think that contract makes sense? I know it.
I don't think
great.
any of them do, to be honest, when it comes to relievers. Like, I don't get any of them, but it is in terms of like what is normal and everything. Yeah. I think his usage being a bit lower may make that one a little rich, But again, he's coming off of a year now where he did see his usage up. He went from 54, appearances to 68. So I do think that ultimately that could be enough to drive him up. But I could see Hoffman being a little bit cheaper, given he's going to be 32 at the start of the season. And, I don't know if that 5th year is going to be something that teams would want to give out.
That makes sense. All right, let's talk about Clay Holmes. I don't think the Yankees are going to re-sign him. Could be wrong. I'm going to a different team. I'm actually aligned with Jack here, both on the Cubs. This is where I feel like the Cubs jump in. A little bit less expensive, but still a very solid reliever, right? Clay Holmes didn't exactly survive in a closer's role, but when he came in more of the 7th or the 8th inning or roles where you need a ground ball, right? Guys on base in the middle innings. That's what I felt the Cubs kind of lacked this year. I felt like they had some guys who you probably could rely on in the 8th or the 9th, and they had their roles, right? You talked about those two guys who had good seasons. Alzolay going down definitely doesn't help. But I really want a guy in the Cubs bullpen who can get that ground ball in the 6th or the 7th inning. But then also, if they need him to close, he can close games. That's why it felt like Clay Holmes and the Cubs made the most sense. But where are you at on him?
Any reliever to the Cubs, I'm in on, and I can agree with. But since I already sent Tanner Scott over there, I got him going to the Red Sox, and
Okay.
it'd be a funny one. I don't know if Yankees fans would be excited about that, or like I think it'd be a doomsday of like, oh, okay, well here's where he figures out the 9th, huh? He's gonna shut the door on us all the time. But that's not why. Honestly, in terms of the way that the Red Sox have kind of attacked philosophically, they do love the high carry guys, but they also hedge that with the sinker guys. And you think about a Fenway Park where, if I'm going for a closer or a high leverage arm, I don't want a guy that has the risk of, giving up that long ball. And I know he did do that at times, but generally speaking, like he's great at getting the ball on the ground. They can have this revolving door in the 9th, I think, potentially, right? Liam Hendricks is going to be back and should be healthy. So that's a guy that obviously can get the 9th. I think Justin Slayton is very capable of being able to pick up the 9th too. He battled some injuries, but was really good overall last year. And then you add in a Clay Holmes, like you can kind of mix and match and pick your spots where you want to go with guys. But I feel like Holmes is a good fit with what they like to do with the sinker slider combination. And then also just the fact that, they need another bullpen arm in there quite badly. And they haven't been afraid to go pick up, some Yankees arms in the past. I think Greg Weisert's going to be, still throwing some important innings for them next year as well.
I'm just thinking in my head because I was at Fenway Park. I was watching Yankees versus Red Sox. It's a game the Red Sox won. I think I counted. I went to about 15 Yankees games this year. I think it was 4-11. Like they never won when I was there, but I was in Boston and they tattooed Clay Holmes. And just in the back of my mind, I wonder if they're thinking like, we don't want this guy now in Fenway doing the same thing. But again, of course, that was against their own team, and that's just my personal experience. I doubt it, but I could see that. I could see them kind of wanting to stick when Brian Cashman comes out and says, "You'll see when Clay Holmes hits the market, he's going to get paid like one of the best relievers." And then the Red Sox give him like a decent contract, and then he turns into that 9th inning reliever, 9th inning closer. I could totally see that. I have him 3 years, 40, but to be honest with you, I have no idea.
Yeah, I wonder with the inconsistencies, and I know it's still like overall is a really good year.
Yeah,
I think he's more in like the 3 for like 30 something range,
could be.
but who knows? Because this is also a guy that is like a candidate to be stretched out further if they wanted to do that. Like the Arsenal kind of, you know, points towards a guy being able to go, multiple innings if they wanted to go that route. But I just think with the way that the Red Sox have liked to approach these sinker guys and kind of getting them, optimized in terms of where they're attacking and where they're locating. I think they may feel like there's something more that they can kind of get out of, a Clay Holmes there too, because that sinker should have performed way better last year. And it did in 2023. Last year, I think from a location perspective, he struggled. It was also up a half tick. And I wonder if that was part of the reason why, he was leaving it up a little bit more, maybe not hitting the spots that he wanted to as frequently. Like I think he could be a tweak away from still being a little bit more effective too. And maybe that change of scenery helps. And maybe with the Red Sox pitching development side of things, they feel like they can help him find that tweak.
I think it's a good fit. All right, let's go to Carlos Estevez. Was a very, very good reliever, but just had a tough kind of go about it at the end with Philly. But I still think that he's very solid, and I think maybe because of that, his market might be a little bit diminished, especially with some of the other relievers getting those big time contracts. I think maybe a 2 or a 3-year deal, a little bit cheaper than maybe even a Clay Holmes might be in order. Am I wrong on the market? What do you think
No,
about that? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think I was gonna say I think he's a two-year guy.
Yeah.
It's definitely less than the other guys. Maybe he can sneak out that third year, but with the way he kind of slipped a little bit, it could be 3 years lower AAV. The strikeout rate dropping at the end of the year was a little bit concerning. You know, this was a breakout year in terms of the command, and that makes me a little bit nervous as well too, where he just really cut down on the walk rate and everything as well. Like 2023, he started really hot, struggled with command, and finished with a 3.9. So like if you look cumulatively, 2024 is somewhat of the outlier season, right? So that for me is not enough to go 3 year or more than 3 years for sure. 3 years maximum, especially with him. Again, he was effective in run prevention with the Phillies, but 18 strikeouts in 21 games or 21 innings, excuse me. Like that's a pretty steep drop off. So it's a unique spot that I'm curious to see what the market is for him. But I don't think it's going to be nearly as robust as some of the other guys.
And I was thinking about a lot of different teams for Estevez. I landed on the Orioles. Not super confident in it. Probably my least confident prediction in this entire, because I think he could go a lot of different places. My reasoning is, Felix Bautista coming back from an injury. You have Yenier Cano, you have Sir Anthony Dominguez, you have Jacob Webb. It's a pretty solid bullpen, but I think if you can level up in areas, I think this would be a decent one. A guy with
Mm-hmm.
closer experience, right? The long ball kind of bit him a little bit, but you get that, Camden Yards, that left field where they just pushed it back 30 feet. So now home runs are literally impossible to get out to left field. But again, he is a righty, so he's going to face more lefties. So maybe that's a mute point. I don't know. That's just the feeling I had, but I could be turned in a lot of different directions. Where are you on him?
Yeah, he's kind of one of those guys I think that could go anywhere, and that's the hard part with the reliever predictions. I had him going to the Blue Jays because I
Okay.
think he's a risky signing,
Yeah,
and
that
I could
makes
just see the
sense.
the Blue Jays going that risky route, and they need high leverage. We agree on that. They need relievers. I think some of the more forward thinking teams and I think a little bit savvier teams are probably staying away. And I could see the Blue Jays kind of outbidding on that front and saying, hey, this is the guy that can be our closer. So or at least share the duties. I could see him going there.
And Jack's prediction for Carlos Estevez, the Sacramento A's.
Yeah.
That's his prediction. Estevez to the A's to join a bullpen with Mason Miller. We know all about him. Tyler Ferguson, Grant Holman, Hogan Harris, Danny Jimenez.
They
Jack,
they do this though, right?
I
Like they
know they
do this.
do.
They'll
Try
throw
to
a
flip him.
random 2-year, $20 million deal at somebody, and it's like, okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that if the market for Estevez ends up being light, like we think it possibly could end up just settling for that A's deal there and pitch his way out of town and get traded again. But yeah, I think it's going to be honestly one of those teams that just are not as um yeah, I don't think have as much of the track record with the relievers. I know Mason Miller's been great, and Urseg was a nice addition for them too with the A's being able to flip him. But yeah, I see it being one of those types of teams rather than a Yankees or a Dodgers or like a team that generally is a little bit savvier. I think on that front. To me this a multi-year deal for Estevez screams risk, and so I see the Blue Jays or maybe even the A's doing that.
Okay, can I please change my answer? From all of the conversation, can I get one change? One
Yes,
change in this whole thing.
one change.
Nationals. I'm sending him back over to the Nationals,
I
actually,
don't
because
hate
the
that either.
Nationals are going to be looking to compete, but potentially if they don't, their window quite isn't open yet. They could potentially flip him at the deadline, just like they did with Hunter Harvey. That feels like more the Nationals. And I agree with Jack. I think the A's make sense, and I think the Blue Jays make sense. I think his market is going to be the A's, the Nationals, or the Blue Jays. I think we kind of nailed it, even though there's no shot now he's going to either of those three
No,
teams.
no, he's gonna be a Dodger somehow now. But yeah,
All right, let's go to some big time hitters, but Before that, we're going to take our second break. All right, let's start with some offensive pieces. Jurickson Profar is our first name. Creating a market, finding a contract for this guy, I think is almost nearly impossible. Is it another 1-year deal coming off his best season to date? But if you look at his year over year, it's right. A great year in 2022. Great is an exaggeration. It was a good year, right? 110 WRC plus. He was fine. The year after in 2023, not so good. 2021, not so good. 2020, okay, right? So it's been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. It's every other right now for Jurickson Profar. Former top prospect, clearly showed a lot. I think there's one team that's going to know the market for Jurickson Profar. The team that had him. And I think the team that would bring him back. I got Jurickson Profar going back to the Padres.
I agree. This was his breakout for sure. This was his best season. He made, slight little mechanical adjustment to do that. And I think it validates it. And, you see him career high in home runs, career high in OPS, career high in batting at, like legitimately almost every single statistic you look at. But he's also limited defensively, right? Like this is a guy that, I mean, is not a good left fielder. He may end up DHing a little bit more and things like that, but there's still a very obvious spot for him with the Padres, whether it be in that corner outfield spot or that DH spot. I don't think he's going to be very expensive. I think it's almost a no-brainer for Profar to go back for his sake and also, for the Padres' sake. And the other side of it too is I just think he fits well there, right? Like you really saw him be very, very outgoing this year and not afraid to really, I think, express himself on the field. And I think part of that was being emboldened by that team and feeling like he's the guy that a lot of people long believed he could be, and becoming that guy there, I think, is quite important. And, I also think he's playing a big part in that clubhouse as well. So I'd imagine they want to keep, that group intact, and he was a big part of that. And I just can't see him really going anywhere else. And I think 3 years at like 15 mil a year or something around or along those lines would probably get it done given the defensive limitations.
Yeah, I wrote down 3 years, 33, 3 for 11. Just to get that third year, because I was just thinking like 3-year deal for Profar. Like, damn.
I mean, he had a 4-win season.
Great.
4.3 F4. He had 24 bombs, and he was crazy clutch for them in so many spots. Like switch hitter. I think 3 is almost a certainty for him.
Should we settle on 3 years, 39? Right? Cut the difference. I'm at 11. You're at 15, 3 for 39. Or do you really think that he's going to get more than I'm saying?
I definitely think he's getting more than 11 a year.
Okay.
I think it would be like 40 at least.
Okay. So we'll slot that in. 3 for 40. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Feels good. Ha-Seong Kim. Oh, by the way, Jack is also aligned with us.
Yeah, everyone. We all got him going back to the Padres.
Yep. And I think we're all going to be aligned here because I think this was your idea.
Yeah, I pitched this in the staff. I should have kept it to myself.
Ha-Seong Kim. I'll give you the floor. I have him going to the Giants to actually I was going to even give 1 point. The floor is yours.
So I pitched this in our staff chat when I was on my way to the Heat game with Ryan Finkelstein. We were talking about all the different free agents and just going over scenarios. By the way, Heat lost on the tip and buzzer beater. So that was a lot of fun. Nice hour train back. But gotta go Heat. That was the first time I watched this year. I think this makes so much sense because you remember this Giants team started to find some bats here all of a sudden. You know that they've got the pitching side of things, but I'm trying to figure out what this team's strength is. It's a hitter-friendly park, or excuse me, the most pitcher-friendly park, and I think they need to finally lean into that a little bit more. They've been doing that slowly. You bring back Matt Chapman, and you have one of the best defensive third basemen of our generation there. Great. You have Jung-Hoo Lee, who was out the whole season in center field. He can play a great center field. Now he's back. Patrick Bailey is an elite defensive catcher. He's there. Casey Schmidt, no matter where you put him, is a great defender. Hopefully he gets a little bit more run there and can do that. They don't have a shortstop. And, I don't see them, if it's not Willie Adames, I don't really know how else they're going to address that. They don't really have the prospect capital to go trade for a major impact shortstop. Go get a great defender. You'll have one of the best defensive left sides of the infield in Major League Baseball with Ha-Seong Kim at short and Matt Chapman at third. Also up the middle now, you have Jung-Hoo Lee in center and you have Patrick Bailey at catcher. And if you put Casey Schmidt at second, he's elite there as well. I love that. And then, by the way, Grant McCray would be one of the best defensive left fielders in Major League Baseball. Instead of trying to like piece together this offense by platooning and doing all of these things, how about being pitching centric and having one of the best defensive teams in Major League Baseball in that ballpark? I think that really works out well. And also Kim Still, if he's a 105, 110 WRC plus guy, they needed more guys like that. You have the Lee and Kim connection. I think a lot of people were talking about that was a reason maybe why Lee could go to the Padres and why they were a contender for him. But I think, there's some familiarity there. It just makes all the sense in the world. And that's why I think Ha-Seong Kim to the Giants makes the perfect fit. And, he gets an opportunity to play every single day at shortstop, where for him to be valuable, he's got to be playing a premium position.
Beautiful fit, beautiful pitch with one caveat. Tyler Fitzgerald is just chopped liver.
A little bit to me. I think it was a bit of a fever dream, but he can play second then. That's fine.
Okay. Potentially.
I love Casey Schmidt, but also like he's kind of super utility, right? He played some center, played some left, played some second base as well, played some first. So I think kind of this super utility role where he's still playing, all the time. He did really hit a wall after that insane fever dream stretch. So I think kind of banking on him would be a lot, but he's obviously a better hitter than Casey Schmidt. So you put him at second base, Schmidt's in that utility kind of defensive first bench role. And I mean, that's the other exciting thing is like you have an offensive oriented second baseman there too. He's probably going to play a decent second base. I mean, that really helps the offensive side of things too. I think this could be a really fun infield all of a sudden if you got Fitzgerald at second.
So I want to pick your prospect brain. Marco Luciano. Nothing.
We're going to put together a piece of like top prospects who are change of scenery candidates. I think Marco should be a change of scenery candidate. The glove is at shortstop, and we've gotten to a point now where I mean you just can't bank on the bat there. So I think they're better off moving him, or just kind of operating under the assumption that whatever he gives you is a bonus.
Go get a pitcher, right? If we're focusing, go sign a big time one. I got Corbin Burns going to the Giants. Go trade for another solid pitcher, fill up that rotation, prioritize defense. I love this plan for the Giants.
And that was the other reason why I went Kim at short is I figured go pitching centric. I also had, as you mentioned on the episode, Corbin Burns to the Giants. So you allocate that big contract, which would probably be roughly the same as Adames, to an elite arm. Now you have that Webb. You have that Webb combination with Burns, which is just disgustingly elite, and then Robbie Ray and Hicks and Harrison, and all guys that I think will really benefit also from pitching in that ballpark. Then you put an elite defense behind them, and obviously you're not going to be able to sign probably both an Adames and a Burns. So I like the value of going to get one of the best pitchers in baseball, and then still getting great value at short. And I don't think Kim's going to command a crazy contract.
Yeah, what do you think it's going to be? Because I was kind of looking at,
he's one of the hardest reads, I think.
Is JP Crawford's contract for 5 years, $51 million, a decent comparison? I was like, kind of, not really. Ha-Seong Kim's going to be 29 years old.
Mm-hmm. That's a problem.
Yeah. Is it one of these 3-year, 21 million type deals? Does he get more? Is it a one-on-one with the labrum thing? I don't know. I really don't know his market.
I have no idea. Because coming off of 2023, I mean, if he duplicated 2023, I think we're talking, potentially north of that JP Crawford deal.
Definitely.
But kind of regressing back to what we saw in 2022, which is still a good player. In the injury, it does become kind of this tough spot. I think it's going to be 3 years, 30 range, and then incentives and stuff like that. But that's why I love the fit with the Giants. Because the thing is if you give this guy 3 years, 30 whatever million, and he is in the worst case scenario, like a 95 WRC plus guy, you're going to be like, maybe we should have allocated that money elsewhere. But it's not going to be like, oh my gosh, this is the worst contract ever. He's still going to pick it really well. He's going to steal bags. He's going to get on base at a decent clip. Like there's no way where I think you get fully burned by an Ha-Seong Kim deal. And that's why I think teams are all going to be aligned with that and say, well, we'll give you 3 years if the AAV is below, 13 million. And I think that's where it'll probably be, is around that 10, 11 range there.
That makes sense. All right, let's talk Joc Pederson.
Yes.
Big time slugger, one of the best platoon bats in Major League Baseball, but he's not a righty platoon bat. He's a lefty platoon bat. So you get him mostly against right-handed pitching, and he crushes right-handed pitching. No defensive ability, really. Right? He's going to play a lot of DH. Maybe you can stash him in a corner if you're feeling good about him, if he's feeling good about his legs that day. But he is brought in to hit right-handed pitching. So I looked at a team that struggled offensively this year, struggled against right-handed bats, or excuse me, right-handed pitching. A team that has had him before, and a team that, when I'm looking at, has zero bench and potentially could even use a corner outfield bat. I think it goes back to the Braves, right? I'm looking at the Braves. Chadwick Trump, Nacho Alvarez Jr., Luke Williams, and Eli White is their bench. Their outfield is Jared Kelenic, Ramon Laureano, and Michael Harris. Michael Harris is the only person among all of those names who is guaranteed a spot. I assume they're going to keep running Jared Kelenic out there. Maybe they will. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they run Ramon Laureano out there. But I think Joc Pederson in this lineup slots in so well. Big time bat there. Familiarity, of course. He was traded over there, I think, in 2023, right? Didn't he sign with the D-backs after he left the Braves?
I'm trying to remember now. Is it 2022 or 2023? He's one of those guys where, like, the amount of teams he's been on in the last couple of years, I can mix it up. But regardless, like, was fit in well there. Well, it was the year they made the run. He was wearing the pearls and everything. So
that was 22.
Yeah, I think it was 22. But actually 21.
Okay.
21. Jeez, time flies.
Yeah.
Holy crap. But yeah, started with the Cubs, goes over to the Braves, and clearly was very comfortable there too. I think that was probably the first team that came to mind for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wanted to put him there. And then I came up with one that just was funnier to me. The only thing that the only thing
one was funnier.
Yeah, no, I don't want the good analysis. No, but honestly, because I actually think that this one makes a ton of sense, and it's kind of a team that needs the offensive jolt. My one concern with the one thing that did hold me back on the Braves was, the same conversation we had about Soler, which they did go do it. I was like, okay, well, Marcell Ozuna legitimately has to be in the DH spot. And then Joc Pederson predominantly needs to be in the DH spot. So at that point, you'd be running Joc probably out into a corner outfield pretty consistently. And I don't think he played much, if at all, in the outfield this past year. So, like, that's the one thing. Maybe he's fine out there, and just, because the D-backs are so athletic in the outfield, it was more of just like no need. But, if the Braves feel like he can play out there, then sure. But if he's a guy that needs to run through the DH spot pretty consistently, that was the only thing that, like, held me back a bit with him going to the Braves, because that was one of the first ones. I think I literally wrote it down and then swapped it late.
It's so funny because that's the reason I put him on the Braves.
It's like, yeah, they were willing to do it before.
That if they're willing to do it with Jorge Soler, and they felt that his defense was out there, because I think at this point in both of their careers, would we say that Joc Pederson is probably a better defender in the outfield than Jorge Soler is?
Oof, it's a good question.
I don't know, but it's at least, I think, equal. So if they were willing to do that, and they just want the bats in there, I think they would potentially get rid of Jorge Soler, because he really is just a worse version of Marcell Ozuna rather than Joc Pederson. He fills that need that they already said that they wanted, but he is the left-handed power bat, which I think gives this lineup a little bit more length.
Well, yeah, so that's the interesting thing. So they clear that spot. Did they clear that Soler spot because they didn't want to clog the DH thing again, and have just a brutal corner outfielder, or was it because, hey, we can go get a better version of this that actually hits right-handed pitching really, really well, which has been an issue, for us, relatively speaking, and fill in Joc. I don't know. But the crazy thing with Joc is he started all 17 of his starts were at the DH spot. So again, is that because the D-backs were so athletic, or is that because he is almost unusable at this point in a corner outfield spot? That would be the only, I guess, decider there. And that would be the only thing that I think restricts him, because otherwise I think it's a great fit.
Who's your fit?
I went Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
I this is a team that, like, pitching wise, man, like they're right there. And you know, we can talk about the staff all day. Everyone knows who they've got and, you know, what they can be there. And I mean, offensively, they were just so limited last year. And I look at what they can potentially gain here by adding a Joc Pederson, right? It's disproportionate sometimes, right? Certain teams, like if you are, you know, kind of average across the board against lefties and righties and whatever, a Joc Pederson doesn't help you as much as a team that, you know, really struggled against righties, which you're going to see more than lefties, and then maybe hit well against lefties, right? Where that's a team that could really get a jolt from a Joc Pederson. The Pirates weren't great against either, but they were, you know, quite bad against right-handed pitching. They were second lowest in WRC plus last year against right-handers, only ahead of the White Sox. And the White Sox were just bad against anybody, could have been thrown underhand. So like that's the fit for me that I think makes a ton of sense, because that's a guy that could legitimately shake up that offense with, if he does what he did last year. I mean, he's not only their best hitter, even if he's not hitting every single day. He's a guy that I think legitimately elevates that offense and creates a totally different look for them. Because when you're looking at what they're going to be next year, right? Like, you know, Brian Reynolds is a nice piece, right? Offensively, O'Neal Cruz is incredibly inconsistent. Who else do you trust offensively in that lineup? I mean, I think very clearly right away, Joc Pederson is the best hitter, I think, in that lineup, like from the get-go. Yeah, again, you can make the case for Brian Reynolds since he's playing every day. So, okay, great. Reynolds is the best hitter. Then I would say Joc is then the clear number two at the very least. And then definitely against right-handed pitching, at least, you know, I think you can make the case that Joc is their most productive hitter at that point. I don't think there's any other team that could remotely be in shouting distance of a wild card spot that could say Joc Pederson's immediately like our second best hitter. And so that's why I just think it's worth it for them. And I also think it's worth it for Joc, who can, you know, I think have a very prominent role on this team. And heck, they might even just let him face lefties more too. So that could be something that he ends up finally getting to do a little bit more of.
So Jack is on the same wavelength as you. He has him instead going to the Nationals. And I understand both of the fits. The reason I put him on a contender is I think there are going to be a lot of one-year deal offers for Joc Pederson. And I think if you're Joc Pederson, are you signing that one-year deal with the Pirates or the Nationals, or would you sign it with the Braves? I'm not even saying that the Braves will be that team. I'm more just saying that I think contenders are going to go after his services, and knowing Joc, knowing the Pearls, like this guy wants to win, right? He went to Arizona. He wants to win, the team that just went to the World Series. So I think that's still on Joc's mind, and I think he's going to have some competitive offers from contenders, and I think that's just where he's going to lean. But in terms of the fit, like I think you're spot on with the Pirates. I think if Jack was on here to pitch the Nationals, he'd be spot on as well. I just think that's where he's going to go, and I think a lot of the offers are going to be competitive.
Well, the interesting thing is that's where I think the Pirates, like if they are in a spot
They
where,
want to
okay,
overspend.
most contenders are going 1 year. Hey, you will be an offensive upgrade for us for the next 3 years. Why
Maybe.
not give him a 2-3 year deal? I mean, this guy, I would give it to him. He had a 151 WRC plus
Oh,
last
I'd give
season.
it to him too.
So that's the thing, is like I think the Pirates, the AAV side is I think more of an issue for them than like the duration side. Give them a 3 year deal, and you know I think they can afford that. The rest of their team is so controllable, and I think that is just a huge jolt for them. And within that 3 year deal, I think Joc could be sold on the idea that the Pirates can be competitive within the next couple years. So I like that fit there. I was surprised with the Nationals because I'm just trying to figure out where he would get consistent. I guess the DH spot would be you would just settle into that DH spot and mash. From that lens, I guess that would be fun. So I could see that too. But yeah, if he's dead set on winning, it could be that higher AAV 1 year deal. But I wonder now at like 33 years old at the start of the season, if he wants to just like guarantee himself as much money as possible and sign that multi-year deal.
I could see it. Let's go to Tyler O'Neill, and Jack is on the same wavelength as you. Tyler O'Neill to the Pirates. Right? So again, don't have to rehash that. I think it's exactly kind of what you're saying. Big bat in the lineup. Maybe some more defensive versatility there with Tyler O'Neill compared to a Joc Pederson can actually take up one of those outfielder spots. If they're talking about signing a multi-year deal, Tyler O'Neill surely has a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of bust, boom or bust type guy. And who do we talk about when we talk about risky contracts? A team that could definitely use a left fielder, because Nathan Lucas, he's 30 years old. I know he had like a good little run there with the Blue Jays, but I think they really want a left fielder, right? With Dalton Varsho, I think going to move to center now. Tyler O'Neill to the Blue Jays makes sense for me.
That's what I
Add
had
more
first.
impact in that lineup, but a little bit risky. Jack has him Pirates. Where you at?
I had them first too, especially he's a Canadian,
Yeah.
and that part makes a ton of sense too. That was my initial fit, and then I last minute switched to the Tigers
Okay.
because I think teams are going to be a little bit wary of O'Neill for multiple reasons. We know about the injury, we know the injuries, we know about the strikeout rate, which is as high as anybody's this year, but also the limitations in terms of not being able to hit righties.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in this big year that he had, 206, 288, 399 against righties, whereas against lefties, 313, 429, 750, 16 home runs, against left-handed pitching. I look at what the Tigers need and where he fits in there. They need some athleticism, they need some defense, and they need a guy that can spell lefties. I mean, their best hitter, they're not willing to hit against left-handed pitching. You imagine Tyler O'Neill picking up the slack from Kerry Carpenter, who's demolishing righties. That is the most insane combination ever. Obviously, Tyler O'Neill is going to want to see righties consistently, but at least that hedges the concern where, like, I think whoever signs Tyler O'Neill is going to want him to be an everyday player. And I'm sure if the Tigers do that, there's still clear opportunity for him to be that. But at the very least, if he's not hitting righties well at all, you can now put him in this spot where he's going to demolish lefties. And I look at that outfield, right? You got a Riley Green out there. You've got Kerry Carpenter, as we mentioned. You've got several other lefties throughout that entire lineup. But like, it was crazy through the playoffs seeing how left-handed heavy that lineup can become. And it's not getting any better with the fact that Colt Keith is there and Jace Young is coming up. And now you had Trey Sweeney in the fold. And like Matt Vierling was the guy who was spelling the lefties at points. You had Justin Henry Malloy, the guy that was spelling lefties. Like, upgrade that to a guy that not only is elite against left-handed pitching, also can play great defense at multiple spots in the corner outfields.
So I really like the bat fit. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned about where he would play in the outfield. I guess he would play in the outfield days that Kerry Carpenter is not in the lineup because, of course, Parker Meadows, I think, has earned that center field job this year. He was so good at the end of the year. He was good in the playoffs. Of course, you still have Riley Green, and then you have Kerry Carpenter. So I guess my only question is, love the bat fit. Playing in the outfield, I guess he would be your primarily DH, or is
Right
Kerry
fielder.
Carpenter just only? Yeah, explain it to me.
Kerry DHs, I think. Lumbar spine issue. His value comes with the bat. He's kind of a liability out there. Once he got better to the point where it wasn't liability, I guess, but he was a liability in the past. Got to a point where it's passable. But even then, I mean, they split his time between right field and DH, and he got hurt still, anyways. Like, I think the goal might be just to get him predominantly DHing. He can play the corner outfield spots in the days where you have a tough right hander and Tyler O'Neill's not in the lineup. But I think ultimately it's a huge upgrade in a very cavernous outfield defensively too, where you have Meadows in center, you have Green in a corner, and you have O'Neill in right. And then also you're able to get Kerry more consistently in that DH role to hopefully preserve his health and also just let him focus on mashing.
Yeah, I could get there with that. All right, let's move on to a pitcher. Yusei Kikuchi. Jack has him going to the Tigers. I have another pitcher actually going to the Tigers. But I have him going to the San Diego Padres. I look at a Padres rotation. I'm looking at Cease, I'm looking at King, and I'm looking at Darvish. Musgrove, I hope the health is okay, but I don't think that you can fully rely on him to be his typical Joe Musgrove self. And then after that, it's Randy Vasquez, who, right, like a 98 innings with 62 punch outs and a 4.87. I know he was in the Juan Soto trade. I don't think you want that guy to be your 5. Matt Waldron flashed, right? Almost Matt Waldron kind of reminds me a little bit of a Tyler Fitzgerald, right? The knuckleball was bouncing, it was moving, and then it wasn't. So is Matt Waldron your 5? I don't know. But I think solidifying that with Yusei Kikuchi makes a ton of sense here. Also, there's no lefties in this rotation either. So I think just in general, they'd be on the market for a left-handed pitcher. And I think Yusei Kikuchi just makes a lot of sense for the Padres. And Scott Boras even said that he thinks the Yusei Kikuchi market is going to be a lot better than some people may think because no qualifying offers. So you don't have to give up a first round pick in order to sign this guy. So I think the contract is going to be decent. He clearly showed when he went over to Houston, man, this guy can pitch. And even I said that this was the craziest deal. I couldn't believe how much the Blue Jays got for Yusei Kikuchi, and the Astros turn him around and make him one of their best pitchers. Does this continue? I think the Padres go out. Maybe Preller sees something and says, yeah, we want to be in the Yusei Kikuchi sweepstakes. So that's where I'm at on him. Where are you at?
I like that. I hope they have the money to do it.
Yeah, I didn't think it'd be that expensive, and I don't really have the Padres doing much else. I just felt like this was kind of one of their big signings of the offseason.
Yeah, maybe they can, somehow finally move that Cronenworth deal or something like that and clear up some money. But I mean, if that could be their big move aside from retaining, Jurickson Profar,
Yeah.
they might be able to move enough money around to make that happen. The other team that I also was like, oh, are they going to spend money is exactly where I look too. And similar reason, because they're not going to have to give up a comp pick. I looked at the Milwaukee Brewers, and I think they
Yeah.
might just surprise us here. You know that much like the Padres, the Brewers, as much as anybody, really value their draft picks. So this is a rare opportunity to get a pitcher as good as Yusei Kikuchi without having to give up the draft pick. I honestly think the draft pick side of things for a team like the Brewers, who actively try to acquire comp picks when they can, is as important to them as not opening up the pocketbook. I look at what they're probably going to do this offseason. They're going to clear up some money probably with Tevin Williams. You look at Brendan Woodruff and the deal that he's on. Like, you're hoping he can come back and be solid, but also he's going to be a guy that's coming off the books regardless in the next year. You look at the rotation though, it's really iffy. It's Freddie Peralta. You're hoping Woodruff looks good after the shoulder surgeries. Then it's Aaron Savali and Tobias. Tobias Myers obviously is a guy that you can count on now, and I should say him before Savali for sure. But then it's Savali, Aaron Ashby, who I think should be actually in a bullpen role at that point.
Colin
Maybe
Ray
you try
doing?
to bring.
What's Colin
Sorry?
Ray doing?
Yeah, God, I don't know. He's a free agent, isn't he? No, where is he?
I don't know.
I don't even know. You have DL Hall, but I think at this point he also looks best in that reliever role. Robert Gasser's out for season with the Tommy John that he underwent in June. I think this could be a move that makes some sense for the Brewers, who don't have the RSN issues that some of these other smaller market teams have. Their core is cheap for a while here. Yelich is the big deal, but then you have Hoskins also coming off the books after this year at 18 million. Maybe they'll be able to dump that salary. But Terang, Ortiz, Frelick, Contreras, Chorio is the extended, but still all of those guys are in that pre-arb kind of range, or early arb range. Maybe this is the one spot where they spend some money, and that could be a guy that you pair Peralta with Myers, and hopefully whatever you get from Woodruff. All of a sudden, this is the much better rotation.
In terms of a contract, because I like the Brewers fit, I'm just a little bit nervous if they will spend money. But I totally understand where you're coming from. I think the conversation about the draft pick being really important and this being a unique time for Yusei Kikuchi makes all the sense in the world. Please, Brewers, spend some money, right?
They gave Rhys Hoskins 2 years, 34 mil.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking that Yusei Kikuchi might be pretty expensive. Chris Bassett signed a 3-year, $63 million deal at 33 years old. Now, Chris Bassett, I think, is a little bit better of a track record than Yusei Kikuchi had going into this, but I think the draft pick does help his market, and with just markets evolving, and especially with how well he ended the season, 3 for 66 I had. $1 more million a year. It makes sense to me. And that just doesn't feel like it's in the Brewers market. But again, is it in the Padres market? Are they going to be spending too?
I don't think they can. I don't think they can afford that either. After
they might not be
bringing back. Ooh, yeah. I mean,
does that make sense though? That contract?
Yeah, because it's pitching, and we have a 60 inning sample of him being pretty darn dominant.
Yeah,
he's going to be still 33 at the start of the season and turn 34 until June. Yeah, it could be around that range, and that might price out some of these teams here. Then that ultimately puts him as a potential Oriole, but I sent Bieber over there. I think you guys all sent some arms over there too. The Mets, he's an obvious contingency plan if they don't retain, Manaea or, but I honestly don't think they should go with another lefty if they don't retain Sevy and they retain Manaea. So it's interesting. Like, there's going to be a lot of teams that want to go get him, but I also am struggling to see if there's one that like really separates themselves and like seems like an obvious fit. I think the Brewers make a lot of sense, but yeah, I mean, the last time they handed out a contract like that was technically Jackson Chourio and then technically, Christian Yelich. So those are like extensions. It is very uncharacteristic of the Brewers, but like, are the Cubs going to go all left-handed? Probably not. Like, it's an interesting thing when you start to look back at it and say, okay, well, which teams would pony up and do it? I feel like the Tigers, that's a lot of money for them to spend in an area that maybe isn't as much of need.
Yeah.
When you got Skubal, you got Reese Olson, but all of a sudden though, you do look at that rotation, it does start to thin out a little bit.
I got another answer for them. Just
I don't hate the
up.
Tigers.
I don't hate the Tigers either. I got another answer coming up that I think might fire you up. Do you want to move on to Nick Martinez?
Well, Martinez has picked up the option, I think, pretty much.
Oh, so he's just going to stay.
Yeah. I think he's going to accept that qualifying out.
I had an idea that he would be such a perfect fit for the Guardians. Command over stuff guy. Going across the pond. Not really from Cincinnati, Ohio to Cleveland, Ohio. But I think he's going to stay with
he's going to take that QO.
Yeah. So I also thought that if he didn't, he's so underrated. I more just wanted to bring him up because Nick Martinez over the past couple of seasons comes back over from the KBO at 32 years old, 2022 3.47 ERA, 2023 3.43 ERA, and 2024 3.10 and 142 innings. So underrated. Love me.
And his second half was monstrous. That's why the Reds gave him the QO. They don't even want to pay him that $21 million, but they're like, oh, we kind of have to. Kikuchi, maybe the one thing I could see is the Brewers doing a Rays type of like backloaded move and then just dump him in the last year or two if he's still throwing well.
Yeah, I could easily see that.
But yeah, it sounds like Nick Martinez is going to take. I think John Heyman reported that he's going to pick up that option. And anytime John Heyman reports something on a Boris client, it's either to help Boris or it's definitely already happened. And that's one of those like definitely happened things. And so yeah, I'll trust that one.
So we got two more to end: Max Scherzer and Paul Goldschmidt. Love these two names. Obviously, the back ends of their career, so they're not going to get the same money that they are used to. And I love my two fits for these two guys. We'll start with Max Scherzer. First, Jack has him going back to the Nationals. Love it. Love that fit. I'm on the same wavelength, just a different team, right? We're talking about the Tigers potentially needing a starting pitcher. Who better than Max Scherzer to come in the tail end of his career? I was looking up, did Max Scherzer have any problems with Detroit when he left? Like sometimes there's these hidden stories that the fans who listen to the show put in the YouTube comments and say, actually, Peter, him and the old pitching coach don't get along. He said some bad things. So I looked it up. Max Scherzer has not said some great things about his relationship with Justin Verlander, but he has said only great things about Detroit. So I think he is going to be looking for right? A 1+1. He wants to keep pitching, but I think he could have a conversation with an AJ Hinch and say, hey, we'll give you a good time. We'll give you $20 million. I don't know what it's going to cost, but we'll give you some good money. Come to Detroit, help us with Job, help us with Reese Olson, and really develop these starters for us while competing on a team that is on the up. I think that pitch would make sense to a Max Scherzer like that. End his career kind of where he started. Usher in the new age of Tigers pitching in a really easy ballpark to pitch in. Place where he dominated. I don't know. I love the fit. I don't know what the money is. Maybe it's too much for Detroit. I love
it. Won't be too much. It's gonna be almost nothing. I think it'll probably be $6-7 million. Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I love it even more.
The only reason why I don't have him going there is you asked who's better for to go there, and I think it's Justin Verlander.
Yeah,
and that was my where I think he goes, because Verlander, even in these like in this shaky year this year, even he still dominates every single time he goes there.
Yeah,
so all the same reasons why I would love that fit. Like if it's not in the cards for Verlander, like let's say Verlander just doesn't want to go back there for whatever reason, or just has a better opportunity elsewhere, then I think they should go all in on Scherzer for the same reasons with the young arms that they have. With just, I think the fan base being reinvigorated, and we saw that. And then I think what better than, hey, this team is competitive, and then we're also bringing back an icon here. And Verlander's more of that icon, but still Scherzer would bring back a lot of positive memories for folks, and I think would be a much welcomed return. That's the same reason why I had him going to the Nationals. I think when you look at the Nationals situation rotation wise, like I love their young arms. They've got some solid pieces there, but like, what are you going to get from Cade Cavalli? That guy continues to be hurt. You start to struggle to fill out the 4-5 spot. You don't have to fully count on Scherzer giving you 160 innings, but it's just another iron in the fire. Bring him back there. This is a young team as well. I think he could benefit this ball club in a lot of different ways, in terms of the clubhouse. And I'm sure for Scherzer, it's been a rough couple of years, just getting back to somewhere where, he pitched the best he's ever really pitched, I think would be great for him.
Yeah, I love that. I love the Nationals of the Tigers fit. Like, I want to see him on either one of those two teams. All right, let's end it with Paul Goldschmidt. So Jack has another reunion for Paul Goldschmidt going back to Arizona. I kind of like it, right? If Christian Walker is moving on, Paul Goldschmidt will likely be a cheaper option. It's definitely going to sell some more tickets, and he's still got some stuff left in the tank. Like, I am not giving up on Paul Goldschmidt, but I went a different route. I think Christian Walker may be too expensive for this team, but they still need a first baseman. John Singleton, that plan, like Jack said on the earlier podcast, more of a stopgap. Born in Delaware, but grew up an Astros fan. So I was thinking, all right, they need a first baseman. They probably want to go a cheaper option, but they think they could potentially get the most out of a Paul Goldschmidt. I think Paul Goldschmidt's going to be an Astro. I don't know how much money it's going to be, but that's a fit that I thought was a cheaper option for an Astros team that's clearly not wanting to spend money, still really wanting to compete, though, because they still have some, really good players on their team. And I thought Paul Goldschmidt makes a lot of sense for them. And I think he might be interested in going to his hometown team, potentially to end his career. Not his hometown team, his favorite team, excuse me.
Yeah, I do like that fit. And, I think the role that he kind of fits at this stage is that, that lefty hitter, that lefty platoon guy that, we see so many aging players, extend their career and being able to do so. I had him going back to Arizona as well, not just for the sake of like all just reunions, just for the sake of reunions, just because I don't think that they're going to keep Christian Walker. I just don't think they're going to be able to afford him. And when you look at where else they could pivot to address first base, I honestly think ultimately their best bet's probably going to have to be platooning that situation there. And if you have Goldschmidt, hitting lefties, and then all of a sudden, if he looks like he's reinvigorated and can hit righties again, then great. He could be that everyday guy all of a sudden. Maybe getting back to Arizona would be great. He's talking about selling tickets and that side of things. Obviously, that would be quite ideal for them. But I was also just trying to think of like, are there teams that struggled against left-handed pitching that could maybe see some value there as well. But ultimately, I just think at the first base spot, there's not a lot of teams that have a gaping hole there. And, I don't know if Goldie is going to hit enough to justify, the DH spot consistently. I think it just makes a ton of sense for him to go back home to Arizona or Houston, a team that definitely is going to have that opening at first. And you can platoon that thing, right? Where if you still want to have Singleton out there, okay, he can go against the righties. You shouldn't see a lefty. And that's where, Goldie takes over that. And then if Singleton struggles, you just let him eat into those reps. So I love the Houston fit. And then I think the next best thing or equally is going back home.
Love it. I love all these fits. So that was free agent prediction episode part 2. Again, you can listen to part 1, which has 16 of the more marquee free agents. And then, of course, during this offseason, we're going to play GM for every team. We're going to, further deep dive into each individual team, figuring out what exactly they need, sign more free agents to them. But next week, coming up on Monday, we got an interview with Guardians right-handed pitcher, reoccurring guest, friend of the program, Tanner Bybee. So be sure to look out that for the Monday episode. And make sure to go get your Just Baseball merch, right? I'm rocking my hat. Arm's rocking his hat. Go find yours in the episode description. And the best way to support this show without spending a dime, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leaving a 5-star review takes about 4 seconds. It's one click away. And if you have an extra minute, leaving a written review telling us what you've enjoyed about the show. Best way to support without spending a dime. And of course, subscribing on YouTube and hitting that like button if you enjoyed this episode. For Arm Layton, I am Peter Apple. We will see you on Monday with a great interview. And we also have a great interview schedule on deck, but you'll have to wait and see to see who we get. And with that, thank you, everybody.